Welcome to the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. On today's show, we break down the week that was a successful road trip and how it shapes the wild card race. We also play a game of Would You Rather Mets edition, go down on the farm, and review our scoreboard predictions before answering your mailbag questions. So subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch every episode on SNY's YouTube channel and leave a question there as well, or wherever you get your shows. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer today and subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. If you'd like to drop us a review, drop us a mailbag question with that review. Watch us on YouTube. And of course, you could ask your mailbag questions in the comments under the show there as well. I'm your host, Connor Rogers, joined as always by my co-host, Joe DeMayo. And boy, what a week it was. The Mets finished a successful road trip and put themselves right in the thick of this wild card race. Just when we thought they were out, Joe, they pull us right back in.
I was never out. But if you went on Mets Twitter, a lot of people were out after that Corbin Carroll grand slam off of Edwin Diaz in Arizona. But hey, that's the way you handle the end of a road trip. It could have been two sweeps: a sweep of Arizona and a sweep of Chicago. But we don't live in that world. We live in reality, which is they took 2 out of 3 from a team 2 spots ahead of them in the wild card standings. And as we talked about and have talked about on this show for well over a month, the Mets routinely found ways this year to not take care of business against the teams they were supposed to. This weekend, facing the Chicago White Sox, they did what was necessary. They didn't blow them out any game, 10-1 or 11-0. They took care of business. They got wins. There's under 30 games remaining in the baseball season. Right now, I don't care if they're pretty. There's just win. Just win the game. That's all you need to do.
That's all they need to do. It doesn't matter how it looks, because the bottom line is if the Mets are going to take back one of these wild card spots, you don't get 2 wins for the really impressive wins, right? You don't get 2 losses for the soul-crushing losses. You just got to find a way. What we said, Joe, take series, right? And to be fair to the Mets now, taking a series against a really good team in Arizona, sweeping a really bad, historically bad team in the White Sox, and now, starting off with a little bit of success in the first night against the Red Sox, where Citi Field sounded quite loud, Joe. I was not there, but even from watching on TV, you can kind of hear the vibe of it. This is a team that it's September, as we sit here and record. They are right in the thick of trying to get a playoff spot right now. And the Mets fans are all in on it right now. The energy of the players, backed by a MVP, I don't even want to say candidate. Francisco Lindor is one of the front runners to be the National League MVP right now. And some surprise pitching, honestly. Let's be real. I mean, a lot of people would probably be surprised if you told them before the season, hey, it's September, and Luis Severino has been reliable for his innings and is right in the thick of it. Sean Manaea maybe having a career year right now. So no Kodai Senga pretty much for the entire season, and the Mets are right there. So a lot of positives for this team coming off the road trip back to Citi Field. And now, Joe, we look at a rotation that they're going to need something from Tylor Megill as well.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's temporary unless something else happens. Paul Blackburn is slated to make a rehab start Tuesday night for AAA Syracuse. And if all goes well, I suspect Paul Blackburn will make the next turn in the rotation. So Tylor Megill, while it got off to a bit of a rocky start against Chicago, he turned it on, retired, I believe it was 9 or 10 in a row right towards the end of his outing, and pitched into the 6th inning. And all the Mets need Tylor Megill to do is basically be competent for another start right now. And then you get Paul Blackburn in and Blackburn in, and then you are, back to the rotation you really want. And, good for Tylor Megill, because obviously he's had a bit of a tough year at the big league level. So even if it was against the White Sox, and I hate when people do this, to be honest, when you sweep a bad team, it's just like, oh, big deal. You swept the White Sox, or Megill pitched well. Big deal. He did it against the White Sox. At the end of the day, even if their record ends up worse than the 62 Mets, they're still technically a Major League Baseball team, and Tylor Megill had to get the job done, and he did. So that's all that really matters there, I think.
Well, I think where the conversation has started to change, Joe, and it's not perfect, right? You brought up the
Right.
game against Arizona that Corbin Carroll hits the grand slam. The bullpen is, I'm not going to say completely rounded into form, but there's some structure in this bullpen right now. And when we were having this conversation right before the trade deadline, everybody was like, the Mets just need to make over the bullpen and they need to turn over every single stone possible to see their options. And credit to David Stearns. Once again, it's not perfect, but you only have so many options in a season. Going out and getting Phil Maton, who the Mets just basically spent money to get. He's been lights out pretty much for the Mets, and he's pitching a lot. And this is somebody that if the Mets want to retain him, he could be under team control next year for about $6.5 million. So listen, I know Brazaban and Stanek have had their ups and downs. Jose Butto has kind of come back down to earth, probably because he's been pitching at an unbelievable rate pretty much. But the bullpen, and even Diaz, right, after that brutal outing, Diaz has looked better since then as well. So this is a bullpen that it doesn't feel like, Joe, when the starter comes out in the sixth inning, you're looking around and going, how are we going to get 12 outs? Where are we going to get the next 3 outs from? It's starting to seem it's getting, and, I got to give a shout out to Danny Young as well, who, you noted when we were texting during the Red Sox game, just another guy you kind of just find out of nowhere and you're getting major league innings from in a very defined role. This bullpen is not perfect, but it's capable right now. And that's one of the biggest differences of this Mets team making a push for a wild card spot.
And Diaz bouncing back from that grand slam, I think, just shows the resolve that not just he has, but it's kind of, emblematic of what this whole team has been this year. How many soul crushing, that at the time felt like season defining losses have the Mets had, and then they just bounce right back. And for them to do that after that grand slam, to just bounce right back and play the way they have, is just the resolve that Carlos Mendoza has instilled in this roster and the players themselves. Because we always go back to the team meeting back in May where everyone's holding each other accountable and things have been good since then. But when you just think about the bullpen as a whole, to your point, Connor, before the trade deadline, we were just like, they have Edwin Diaz. We don't know who's pitching the 8th. We don't know who's pitching the 7th. We don't have a lefty we trust because at the time Jake Diekman was still here. And despite his strikeout of Aaron Judge, he obviously was largely unsuccessful this year for the Mets. And we're at a point right now where it feels like there are some defined roles. Danny Young is the first lefty. Jose Butto is basically the 8th inning guy. Then you have Brazaban and Stanek, and Maton is, certainly in play for 8th inning as well. So the bullpen is getting better and they feel more confident out there. And I've always compared, to bring NFL into this because the NFL season starts this week, I've always compared relievers in a way to like NFL cornerbacks, where it is all about confidence and momentum. If you're not feeling it, it's going to fall apart quick. And you see that with corners trying to cover receivers and struggling there. But yeah, that's kind of how I compare the two things, is the corners and the relievers, that very similar in that light.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. We know how when we've seen guys just go from having historic seasons to falling off a cliff, it can be a very volatile aspect of the game, and you're just trying to catch lightning in a bottle when things aren't going right. And to be fair to the Mets, and we don't have this conversation enough, right? I mean, when you look at the guys that they've lost this year to injury, and it's bigger than just Brooks Raley, who is the second biggest piece of this bullpen, but Drew Smith, who gets a bad rep through the fan base. Drew Smith had a 3.06 ERA in almost 20 appearances. Like, Drew Smith was a reliable reliever for this team this year. They've lost various guys, big names to injury. And even right now, the guys that were nice surprises in Dednell Nunez and Sean Reed-Foley, who were both having marvelous seasons, they're both on the IL. It sounds like Nunez might be able to come back at some point this year. It is not looking as optimistic for Sean Reed-Foley, so we'll keep an eye on both. But yeah, it's a big turning point for the Mets, is that they were a team that for a long time, it felt like they were finding ways to lose games, where when something was going right, everything else was going wrong. And now with the Mets, they're finding ways to win games that when they find the things that are going right, somebody else also is picking up somebody that's kind of going through it in the moment. And we've seen that with the vibe of this team. So an interesting week that will be, Joe. Red Sox, Reds, Jays. honestly 3 teams we rarely ever talk about on this show, especially the 2 in the American League. The Mets take the first game from the Red Sox in what felt like a dominant pitching effort. I have said this all year. I feel like I sweat through 95% of the Mets wins, maybe 98.9% of the Mets wins. The game against the Red Sox, not just the insurance runs they were able to get, but the pitching, it felt like the Mets would have been in control if that game went 9 more innings.
Yeah, at no point did I feel that game was slipping away. And there's been many Met wins throughout the season, Connor, like you said, that we sweat through as fans. And it's just like can't throw strikes and you're waiting for that shoe to drop. The only time that it kind of got a little iffy for a second was Danny Young after he gets the first 2 guys out, puts a couple guys on, throws the wild pitch, and it's just like, all right, here we go. Rafael Devers coming up. You could kind of see it from a mile away, and he gets a soft bounce out the second base to end that inning. But yeah, it was a game where the Mets just felt in control the whole time. And Luis Severino, we talk about Sean Manaea so much on the show because you definitely didn't expect this level of performance from Sean Manaea. When the Mets signed Luis Severino, you and I were on this show saying, we don't know if he's going to make all his starts throughout the year, but we're pretty confident that if Luis Severino does make his starts, he's going to be successful. And this is, the culmination of the work that he's put in, that the training staff has put in to help keep him healthy. And, between Severino and Manaea, they are certainly making the offseason decision-making for the Mets going to be pretty interesting to see how they approach those 2 guys.
It really is. And obviously the market will dictate a lot of things. I'm enjoying that it's September, Joe, and we haven't been turning 85% of the podcast into the offseason ahead. We're talking about the now, but David Stearns has a lot of business to take care of. And I think if you're a Mets fan, this is something I thought about over this week, Joe. The Stearns effect has to be making you feel good about not just the players that they acquire, but the players that they let walk away. And listen, there'll be times where you go, man, I wish we could have kept that guy. But what did the Mets just do to field a competitive team? And it's September. Like, this team, to be fair to them, they're right in the thick of it until the end. He went out and he hit on a 1-year deal in Luis Severino. He basically built a rotation out of flyers, right? Severino, 1-year flyer. Manaea, it's the fakest 2-year deal ever. He has the player opt out after this year. It's a 1-year deal because if Manaea was even average, he's probably opting out and getting paid again. You just look at what they've been able to, even some of the different 1-year deals. Like, Bader's been great defensively in center field, and his bat has run out of juice a little bit this second half of the season, but there's no reason he can't turn it on at any moment once again. So JD Martinez, a late add to the DH spot. It just feels like a lot of the cost-effective buttons Stearns pressed this offseason, because it was really the only buttons he could press. He hit on a good amount of them, and that's not easy to do in this sport. And the guys that are executives that do that in this sport are the best at it. So the Mets will be playing that market again next year. Are they going to go after Juan Soto for $1 billion? Yes, but they're also going to be looking to fill pivotal spots with guys that are trying to bounce back. And the pathway we just saw with Manaea and Severino is the dream of that. It's the absolute dream of that. No term on the deal. We're going to have hard conversations about them after the season. But I think if you are a Mets fan and you're trying to get away from you're feeling good about watching the team right now, but you're scared for when it ends, because it could end without a playoff appearance. It could end getting knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, whatever it is. And then you feel like you're starting over at a lot of spots on the roster again. I think the big picture in the glass half full is the guy in charge is showing why he was so desired for so long by the owner of this team.
And I recommend you just enjoy the moment. Look, we're gonna go through all the offseason stuff in October, November, December, January, leading into spring training in February. So I know I just brought up the offseason, so I'm kind of talking out both sides of my mouth, but let's try to enjoy the moment as fans. And, to your point, Connor, about the success of those pitchers, it shows that the Mets have a program in place. So if you are an agent for one of these pitchers that need a rebound spot, you look at what the Mets were able to do and say, that might be a good place to place my client if, the finances and everything work out. But yeah, obviously you're not going to hit on every 1-year deal. The Mets had some misses this year, and more often than not, you're probably going to miss more than you're going to hit, but the big ones have hit, and that's really what matters.
Right. At some point, I really like the point you make about where agents send their guys, right? I mean, Luis Severino being healthy this year, it's not that the Mets got lucky, is that the Mets medical
Right.
and health science had a plan for him. And he's been vocal about this the entire way. That is, well calculated, and where the Mets can be more advanced than other teams in the sport right now because of the financial power they have backing those departments. All right, let's talk about the wild card picture real quickly, and then we'll get into the would you rather. I mean, as we sit here and record, the Mets are a half game out from the Braves. They've made up some ground on the Diamondbacks and the Padres, although the Padres look like a force right now, and they just got Tatis back. So I wouldn't put too much chips in anything happening with them. It's a volatile race right now, Joe. Each week it's high variance, but the bottom line is, with the injuries the Braves have dealt with, some of the ups and downs the Diamondbacks have dealt with, and the Mets playing some of their best baseball right now, and we've said this for a while, it feels like this is truly going to come down to the final 6 games of the season.
Yeah, not just to repeat our shows, week in, week out. It's probably going to come down to those last 6 games. But look, the Braves, they're playing pretty good ball. Obviously, they lost 3 out of 4 to the Phillies, but those injuries mounted up on them. So I think that's a big reason why the Mets and the Braves are probably neck and neck right now. The Diamondbacks are going through a big kind of like roller coaster of late. I know since the All-Star break, they have one of, if not the best record in the sport. So obviously they've had a good second half, but things kind of flipped when Ketel Marte went on the IL.
Yeah.
Like, don't realize how much the Diamondbacks necessarily missed him. And they also have a pretty difficult September schedule to look ahead to. So, while the Mets right now, the focus is on Atlanta because you're half game back, and that is a playoff spot. The Mets are only 3 back of Arizona. And that's square. That could be squarely in their sights as well. But what they really just have to focus on here is just win tonight's game, Tuesday night against the Red Sox. David Peterson's on the mound. Happy birthday, David Peterson! So that's a start on your birthday. Hopefully, only means good things. We'll see if you're listening to us on Wednesday. You're either going to shake your fist at me or smile right now. But David Peterson, make a good start tonight, and let's just win the series. Like you said a few minutes ago, Connor, win series. You're not going to go undefeated for the month. The Braves aren't. The Diamondbacks aren't. So it's going to be a battle down to the last final games. And this is exactly what Major League Baseball wanted when they expanded the playoffs. There's more fan bases invested, and they want these things to come down to the wire. So while there's negatives to it, I consider this a positive because right now I'm excited.
You nailed it, right? That's exactly what they wanted. More fan bases invested. It's weird. I want to say more action at the trade deadline, but it also prevents some teams from selling.
Right.
So that's kind of a catch-22 where it probably didn't have any ramifications at all.
Push the deadline back a little bit.
That's a really good way of putting it. It's probably time to push it back, as much as that drives people nuts too. And the fact that the Padres and the Diamondbacks close out the season against each other could just be really interesting to watch, depending how this shakes out. At the end of the day, the Mets going down to Atlanta, their second last, series of the season, that's probably going to dictate their playoff hopes. But there are 2 other spots, and those 2 other spots where they're slotted now play each other at the end of the season. So it's going to be a wild finish. It is going to be a wild month of September. We'll have you covered here at the Mets Pod, of course. Joe, let's do a little would you rather here. And this is kind of a lighthearted, feel good. How about hitting in a clutch spot? Would you rather have DJ Stewart or Ben Gamel?
I don't know how lighthearted this question is exactly, but I will go DJ Stewart over Ben Gamel. DJ Stewart obviously has struggled for the Mets this year and got sent back to AAA Syracuse, and he was hitting down there. But if you told me one of these guys has to come through with a hit or a home run, I'm gonna take DJ Stewart over Ben Gamel.
You're crazy.
I'm crazy.
I don't think anyone's caught on to this. I have a good friend that is a diehard Houston Astros fan. That's the only reason.
Is Ben Gamel doing well there? I know he got claimed.
Ben Gamel is on a scorcher for Houston right now. In 12 games, he has 44 plate appearances. He has an 822 OPS. He's getting on base at a 386 clip. He's had big hits for them, like a game-winning hit. I understand DJ Stewart is probably the better major league hitter, But it is hilarious that
That
Ben
that
Gamble
is
went to
how
Houston and he's been a hero.
that is how not cognizant I am of what's happening in Houston. I knew he got claimed and I thought nothing of it. If you had told me he
Same.
got designated for assignment by now, I would have believed you. Like I had no idea he was actually still on the roster. But good for Ben Gamble. I mean, he did some good things coming off the bench for Mets.
He didn't
Defense
get much
replacement,
opportunity.
running on the base paths. Yeah, and drew some walks when he was up there. But maybe the answer is Ben Gamble. I don't know.
All right, the next one. This is actually lighthearted. This feels very Francesa-ish. Would you rather have lunch with Alex Young or Danny Young?
So in one of my dynasty fantasy football leagues, there's a friend of mine named Kyle that's in the league, and I'll show you guys a picture after. He looks identical to Danny Young. So I will go with Danny Young sheerly for that reason. I
feel like
don't know.
You're out with your friend.
Yeah, exactly. I have no idea the personality of Alex Young, but yeah, I'll go Danny Young.
I guess it has to be Danny because you could actually talk about things going on with the major league team. To be fair to Alex
is there. Come on now.
Alex, yeah, but I feel like we see a lot more of Danny.
Yeah.
I don't know though. Alex Young has been totally fine. Like good. He's been good.
That was a good waiver claim. So that's back to your point, not to get away from the fun for a second. Back to your point, that was just a waiver claim by David Stearns, and Alex Young. He hasn't pitched a ton for the Mets, but in what he's done, he's
7 appearances.
Provided some decent stuff. Yeah.
He's allowed 1 run in 7 appearances.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Here's my more important question than which one you'd rather have lunch with. Do you think the average Met fan realizes these are 2 different people? Because I don't.
No, I do not.
Like we do. We host a Mets podcast and talk about this team every day of our lives. Like I'm talking about, like my dad. He's a diehard Mets fan, but I honestly he's not paying enough attention, I think, to the bullpen to realize that there are 2 different Youngs that are both left-handed.
Yeah.
That don't pitch like Edwin Diaz. It's like, it's the 9th inning. Edwin Diaz is coming in. They just come in sporadically. I bet most Met fans do not realize these are 2 different humans.
You have to do the old school, what they used to do when 2 players had the same last name. You had to do the first initial and a dot on the back of the jersey.
Yes.
Because now it's just like, yeah, you're both Youngs. And yeah.
Both throw left-handed. They're both 6'3". They're both over 200 pounds.
I could see how people would get incredibly confused.
Man, that we missed a golden age Francesa call on Alex and Danny Young. Okay, so it's like when the Giants come into town. Do they get lunch with the New York Giants?
Yeah.
If you could only get one of these back this season, who would it be? Kodai Senga or Dednell Nunez? I think this question is not supposed to be this hard, but it's shockingly not easy. For me, Joe, it is Senga because he's the ace of the Mets staff, and as much as what Manaea has done this year, which is unbelievable, nobody in this rotation has the upside of Senga. So it has to be Senga, but it goes to show you how much of a game changer Nunez was in spots where you were just sweating bullets.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is this just shows how much Dednell Nunez has come along, that he's in this question, right? The answer to your point is Kodai Senga, and I'm assuming in this would you rather, I'm getting a healthy, ready to go, pitch full bore, not the Senga conversation that kind of needs to happen, right? Like what's going to happen if he does come back? Does he come back in 3 to 4 inning spurts? What exactly is his usage? But in a world that I could have ace Kodai Senga back versus set up man Dednell Nunez, can you imagine going to a wild card series and saying Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, Luis Severino? You feel pretty good about your chances against really almost any of the teams you're going to face in that round, at least.
I guess the argument is get me to the point of the game where I'm sweating out, closing out a win, rather than I hope we're winning and we got the reliever to help us out.
That's true.
It's kind of like that, as much as it's weird to say. If they had Senga, you're right, Joe. You nailed it. The big 3 that you were lining up. It would feel good. It would be something. All right, how about this one? And this is very topical. Deadpool or Wolverine? I feel like you have a take on this.
I'm a Deadpool guy. I love
Yeah,
Deadpool.
it's pretty. He's pretty great.
I wasn't a huge, like X-Men guy, truly. But the Deadpool Wolverine movie was awesome, and I love that our producer Jeff put that in here because the best part about this is he knows I'm into this and he knows you are not.
Yes, I have
So
not seen this movie yet, but I actually am a big
would you
fan of
rather?
Deadpool.
Okay.
I am.
Have you seen the other Deadpools?
Yes, I've seen the other Deadpools.
Okay.
So I have to say Deadpool, but the kind of issue is like I really like Hugh Jackman and everything else. I just haven't. I haven't seen Wolverine movies.
Yeah.
So, but he's awesome in everything else. So I feel like I have to say Deadpool. But if I actually sat down and watched Wolverine, I might give you a different answer.
That movie's great. You got to see it.
Okay, done. Our last one here. Who would you name as the number 3 starter for the Mets right now? Jose Quintana or David Peterson?
David Peterson.
I think it's not close right now.
Yeah, right. David Peterson, I know. And it's just the way that this world works nowadays that everyone has access to Baseball Savant, right? And if you go and you look, David Peterson's expected numbers are nowhere near his numbers that he's actually performing on the field. But there's a point in time where you just got to see what you see, right? There's always a line. And David Peterson's pitched consistently well. He's pitched consistently deep into games, which is something that he previously had not done. And Jose Quintana, at this point in his mid 30s, he feels a bit like a guy that's, running out of steam a little bit, where, the stuff isn't quite there, but if he locates really well, he's going to succeed. And the problem is this year, he hasn't located as he has historically. And David Peterson, I have quite a bit more trust that when he takes the ball, the Mets are going to be put in a position to win than I do Jose Quintana right now.
I'm with you, which is tough, right? Because Quintana, he's a vet. He's had a lot of success in his career. He's had good moments for the Mets when he's healthy. It's just been it's not like Carrasco levels this year, but it just feels it just feels like he's prone to those starts where he's just got to grind through 4 to 5 innings, and you don't know how you're going to get there. And you nailed it, Joe. Like when you look at Peterson's advanced numbers, it's not like he's Johan Santana out there, but he's had a high ground ball rate this year, which has been probably the biggest difference. And he pitches deep into games. And the 2.83 ERA, 8-1 record is what it is. Like, what do you want to say at that point? Like, what? Because he's not throwing 100, striking out a million guys. He's not good. No,
right.
So
he's pitching different. He's like you said, it's ground ball rate. The strikeout rate is down, but he's really emphasizing his sinker, and he's keeping the ball on the ground, inducing weak contact. So all in all, I mean, the expected stats are what they are, and there is a use for expected stats, but I wouldn't just go there all the time and just say, oh, well, he's expected to not be good, so he's not actually pitching good, because he's actually pitching good.
Right. At some point, the eye test is the eye test, and the results are the results. Let's go down on the farm, a little AAA Syracuse check-in. How about Drew Gilbert and Luisangel Acuna here, Joe? And I know the people listening right now are probably wondering why neither of them were a September call-up. I've seen a lot of power from Gilbert from the highlights I've watched of Syracuse, and Acuna just seems to be really kind of stapling together multi-hit efforts, or at least consistently getting hits night after night.
Yeah, right now, Drew Gilbert, I mean, he's getting his footing back under him. Obviously, he's been back for a couple weeks now, but the power has shown up in a big way. But that's really offensively all you're seeing. He's not stringing together those 3-hit games, those 4-hit games. He's 1 for 5 with a home run kind of thing. So that's why he probably wasn't really much of a consideration for a September call-up. I still think Drew Gilbert is a key cog in the Mets' future. I just think that's just not something that needs to happen right now. I was on the show last week saying that I thought Luisangel Acuna should be the September call-up, and I stand by that. I think the offense that he's had at AAA, it's been a lot of up and down this year. I get what the Mets are saying, right? Carlos Mendoza said they want Acuna to be playing every single day to continue to grow his offensive game because they consider him a long-term piece for this team. But I mean, right now you're in a pennant race, and the Mets could
Right.
use speed. The Mets could use defense. The Mets could use versatility. And, Pablo Reyes can run. You saw him score on when he went out there as a pinch runner. So nothing against Pablo Reyes. I just thought Acuna would provide, a fun boost to this team. One of the top prospects come up. And, the big thing here is you can change these guys.
Yeah.
So if Acuna, keeps hitting and, an injury, something happens where more playing time can become available, I think Acuna still is a possibility to come up before the season's over. But yeah, I think that's really it. The Mets want him to get consistent at bats, and I get that because look, when is he ever going to play when he's on this Mets roster?
He's not.
McNeil's the second baseman, and when he's not the second baseman, Jose Iglesias is the second baseman. So something would have to happen, I think, for Acuna to get that call.
Yeah, listen, the Mets are not in a situation as they were last year that they are evaluating things August into September. They're not. Like,
they're trying to win.
They're trying to win, and they are going to try to stretch every advantage possible to win. And if they feel like Acuna is their best weapon for the designated runner spot on the roster, then eventually he will be here. But right now, they want him to continue to play. So it was very fair what Mendoza said. You're listening to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SNY's YouTube channel, or wherever you get your shows. All right, Joe, let's review our scoreboard predictions from last week. Yes or no, will Starling Marte hit at least one home run? Joe, you said no. I said yes, a point to you. Good call, sadly. Yes or no, will the Mets win the series against the White Sox? We both said yes. The easiest point we will ever have in the history of the scoreboard. Over-under push was at 2 for Pete Alonso home runs. He hit 3. Joe, you pushed it 2. I went under. This is just, at this point, take Pete Alonso out of the categories. Take Pete Alonso out of the categories. It doesn't matter what it is. He will always find a way to go drastically under or over, or we just can't get it right. Over-under push was at 2 for Mark Vientos home runs. Joe, you pushed. I went under. Vientos did not hit a home run this week. Point to me. Over-under push was at 1 for Francisco Lindor home runs. Joe, you pushed. I went over. He hit 2. Another point for me. Over-under push was at 5 for David Peterson innings in his next start. Kind of a disrespectful line on David Peterson from our producer, Jeff. We both went over. We both got the point. Peterson pitched 7. Oh, Jeff's on Baseball Savant too much. He thought the bad underlying metrics were finally going to catch up to David Peterson. Over-under push is at 4 for Mets wins. Joe, you pushed. I went over. The Mets won 6 games. A nice week for me, Joe, and I needed it. I'm still out of this thing. I had 5 points this week. You had 3. You lead the season series 55-50. So let's see if I can continue to make up a little bit of ground. Run out of time. All right, this week, 6 games, 2 against the Red Sox, 3 against the Reds, 1 against the Blue Jays. I feel like if they threw all the teams in a hat and you just shake them up, like this is what you end up with. Very odd portion of the schedule. Yes or no, will Starling Marte hit at least 1 home run? Man, this is pretty tricky right now, Joe, with Marte, because 1, you got to factor in that he's not going to play every day, but he is playing quite a bit. I'm going to say yes again. I'm going to double down here and say Marte gets the home run just because by the law of averages, he's so due for one. What do you think?
I'm going to keep going back. I have 2 in a row with a no, so I'll keep riding the no. And if he hits a home run, I will gladly give you that point.
Joe, this category is just for you. Over-under pushes at 2 for DJ Stewart hits.
Oh, under. JD Martinez is going to be back like today or tomorrow probably, right? So maybe not today, but he's going to be back here really soon. And I think once he's back, DJ Stewart will find his way back to AAA Syracuse. This feels like an easy under. And so unless DJ Stewart plays tonight and has a multi-hit game.
Yeah, I have to go with the under here. My analytics department is doing research on this one as we speak, but they're telling me that for now, take the under on DJ Stewart hits. Over-under pushes at 1 for Francisco Alvarez home runs. Alvarez just not a lot of power lately. I'm going to go under here, Joe. And obviously, Torrens plays a lot too. So this is kind of the double one where Alvarez not much power right now. And the fact is he's going to play 3 of these 6 games. What do you think?
Yeah, right now, Alvarez is going through it at the plate. He obviously had the huge walk-off home run not long ago, but it hasn't been a ton since then, and they're getting Torrens in the lineup a little more than they were previously, so I'll also go under, not to follow you, but I'll go under on Alvarez.
All right, Joe, you get to kick this one off. Over under pushes at 1 for Francisco Lindor home runs.
Man, every time Francisco Lindor comes up, I think he's going to hit a home run or get a hit. Like every single time. The confidence that he has instilled in me is something that I can't say I fully expected. So I will go over on the home runs. He'll hit more than one this week.
Yeah, I'm going over. Lindor is feeling it in the middle of the MVP race. Historically, he is a monster in September, and specifically, he's a monster with the power in September. I think he's hit the most home runs of his career in the month of September compared to every other month he's played in. So, and the OPS, I believe, is the second highest. This is it's Lindor's time of year. He's a September player. He's looking for the big moment. He's looking for the big games. I'm going over on Lindor home run set at 1. All right, another one here, and I'm going to kick this right with the over. Francisco Lindor hits is set at 7, Joe. I'm going over on this as well. Give me all the overs on Lindor.
Give me everything on Lindor. We're way too similar, so we'll change maybe for the last couple here. But yeah, Lindor over. I'm taking the potential MVP guy. Everything he's doing right now, I'm in.
You get to kick this one off. Drew Gilbert home runs. The number is set at 1. Syracuse plays 6 games during our podcast week.
I'll push, but he is seemingly hitting home runs. It feels like every other day. It's not literally that, but he's definitely tapped into his power. And boy, do I love watching him hit home runs because he lets you know that he hit a home run as soon as he makes contact. But I'll push. He's
got some of the Bader swag where like he feels himself off the swing, and you don't know if it means anything, but it looks cool.
Yeah, Bader does that, and the ball's like 10 feet from the infielder.
I'll go with the under for Gilbert home runs. I think he hits for a little more contact this week, but the power, kind of gets zapped a little bit. All right, over under push is at 4 for Mets wins 6 games. I will push here. I think the Mets go 4-2 in the 6-game stretch, Joe.
Ooh.
Which is fine.
Yeah,
yeah. I'll take it.
4-2 is great. You know what? I'm gonna make this fun. The Mets are gonna win 5. They're gonna go 5-1 this week. I'm gonna go over, and let's make this a little interesting. And I believe the Mets right now are playing good ball, and I think everyone's attributing it to just the Chicago series. But I think they're playing good baseball, and they're gonna be able to go 5-1 this week.
Feels like they just got the right vibe right now. The Mets. They have a team that has a spark, has some juice, which is really saying something after that devastating Arizona loss. It really, really is. All right, let's jump into the mailbag questions here, and we got another 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you to TG from NJ. Do you think the Mets will be within striking range come that last series against Atlanta in late September? I spoke my piece earlier, Joe. I know you've agreed with me. I think the Mets' fate, destiny, will be in their own hands going into that series. It might not be perfect. They might not be a half game back like they are now as we're recording. But whether they need to sweep or they need to take 2 out of 3, I think it'll be in their hands.
I agree totally. I think the Mets are very much going to be in striking distance because I've said this on the show the last couple of weeks. I don't think the Mets are going, undefeated or going on a torrid run through the whole month of September. And I don't think Atlanta is either. So this is going to come down to those last few games. And, like you said, I think that Atlanta series screams like not necessarily the winner of that series gets the 3rd spot, but the loser of that series needs help from the opponent of the other team in the last series of the season.
All right, our next one here from Scott Stern 7845 on YouTube. Thank you, Scott. Hey guys, at the trade deadline, we traded Gervais for Tyler Zuber, but he was never called up. Am I missing something? I mean, why trade a prospect for a veteran who you don't use? Thanks. Joe, what do you think of this one?
So the Mets, and David Stearns talked about this right after the trade deadline. Tyler Zuber is someone that they targeted for at least a couple weeks prior to the deadline, and we're in talks with Tampa to try to get him, and it didn't come in to fruition until obviously deadline day when they made that trade. The reality here is minor league options are a thing. Wasker Brazoban and Ryan Stanek, who are other relievers acquired, they have more major league experience and success. So I think they grabbed Zuber because they consider him a higher likelihood to help the big league team now. And he's still young enough to help the big league team going forward. And he's under contractual control. So it's not as if, they rented Tyler Zuber, stuck him in Syracuse, and he's going to be, a free agent in the offseason. It's just a guy that, we talked about how Stearns had success with the Danny Youngs, the Alex Youngs, and these guys that he's located. Zuber is someone that was on his radar that he wanted, and it's not impossible to see him before the month of September is out, but it was just someone they wanted, and they're utilizing the minor league optionality. I think that's a word that he has, and if not, it is now.
I think with Zuber, because I know the numbers haven't been pretty in Syracuse, right. He's probably a project, Joe, that you get in the pitching lab in the winter and really try to get him ready. Like I understand the question. I really do. From Scott
why trade?
Here.
Yeah, that's the deadline is to upgrade your major league team largely, but the Mets are kind of looking at this as let's upgrade our organization.
Yes, it just coincided, ironically, at a time at the deadline that they needed as many relievers as possible. They acquired a lot of relievers. Like if you count Maton, they got Stanek, they got Brazoban. They had a lot of creative moves. He wasn't treated that way. Like he went right to the minor leagues. It was never a thought that like, hey, this guy's going to upgrade our bullpen right now. So we'll keep an eye on Zuber in the offseason, more importantly. Nick Pauly on YouTube, our final mailbag question. Why is Phil Maton so effective? Does his reliability contradict the industry standard that 89 for a right-hander is a no-fly zone? Joe, I have wondered this as well. Now, just watching on TV, it feels like Maton is one of those old school guys that I'm pulling up his baseball savant numbers right now, but it looks like he has a pretty unique curveball in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
That would be the thing that stands out to my amateur eye from watching him, but it's a fair question in an era where every reliever's pumping 99. Maton comes in, he throws as soft as almost any reliever in baseball, and he's the Mets' most effective reliever, and he's had a great career.
I circle back to spring training when we were talking about how David Stearns likes to build bullpens. He doesn't want 7 guys that do the same thing, that throw from the same angle, that have the same stuff, the same velocity. He wants each pitcher in his bullpen to have a unique characteristic to them. And Maton is one of those guys where, to a degree, in a way, a bit of an anomaly, right? It doesn't mean he's the only one, but the list is short. It's just hard nowadays to get by without velocity, without having extremely good breaking stuff, which Maton does. That curveball is hellacious, and he mixes a cutter, he mixes a sinker. So where Maton succeeds is he's a guy that throws a little bit of the kitchen sink at you where everything's moving. And so many pitchers nowadays throw a 4-seam fastball, which is a straight pitch. And, you can have the induced vertical break, which gives it kind of like that illusion of rising. But the reality is Maton just throws a bunch of stuff. One goes here, one goes there, one goes down here. Everything's moving in different directions. And if he's able to harness and throw his pitches for strikes, he's going to succeed. And that's what he's done since the Mets got him. And to your point that you mentioned way earlier in the show, Maton has a team option for next year. And, he is pitching himself into the Mets having to heavily consider exercising that option and bringing him back for the 2025 team. And, we talked about this too, last point on this, shortly after the trade deadline. Let's not discount Phil Maton's numbers in the postseason and Ryan Stanek's career numbers in the postseason. These are guys that are ready to pitch in big spots. So, yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's just he is unique. And, every once in a while you have these guys that come across that are unique, whether that is a submarine type,
Taylor Rogers
delivery. Yeah, exactly. So there's unique guys that, get by differently. And then, of course, the game is going to be predominantly dominated by 95 plus mile an hour 4-seam fastball slider guys.
Yeah, it's a really good call out of building a bullpen that is, has different roles, but also different ways of attacking. And once again, you nailed it. Like the arm angles, the different speeds, the different movements, a lot of things like that. I think Maton is definitely an outlier, I would call it, in today's game, but that doesn't mean it's not effective in what he can do. And it's been wildly effective for the Mets. I mean, he's looking like one of the, it seems dramatic to say, but like season saving type low cost acquisitions, because he's gotten during this run specifically, he's been nails. over.
They were
and
in
over.
dire straits when they got him. Like, we talked about the trade deadline where it's just like the Mets need to bring in relievers. Like 2 weeks before the deadline, we're just like, the bullpen is so bad that the Mets are going to be sellers at the trade deadline. Forget about adding to the
Right.
bullpen. And Maton was a necessary acquisition. And, good on David Stearns for, you know, being a guy that's always evaluating the market, because we always talk about the trade market doesn't kick off till after the All-Star break. Well, David Stearns was having conversations. You're always asking. It's the, in a way, like fantasy football, right? You're always just checking out the market, seeing what you could trade for. And it just so happened there was a fit, and Maton stabilized things for a couple weeks. And then the Mets were able to make, more significant additions at the deadline, and they are where they are.
Joe, any closing thoughts as we head into another pivotal week for the Mets here? I mean, we talked about the odd schedule. The Red Sox, obviously, at Citi Field right now, they're going to see the Reds. They're going to see the Blue Jays. And we know how interesting things are going to get towards the end of the month. But, I mean, I want your closing thoughts, and mine are just simply this team is playing game by game right now. And I think that kind of focus and attitude, it's a credit to the two guys I consider the leaders of the team right now. And that's not only Mendoza, but Lindor. I think they've kind of headlined that mindset for a long time now. And if the Mets continue that mindset, they're going to be in this thing.
Keep the momentum rolling. I mean, things are going really good. Just, keep rolling. There, as of this recording, and if you listen on Wednesday, it'll be 23. There's 24 games left in the season. Just win the baseball games. That's all you got to do. I don't care how pretty it is. I don't need it to, I would love it if every game was 10-1. That would be ideal. Make my blood pressure a little lower, but just find a way to win as many of these games where that series against Atlanta, because they're going to win plenty of games too. Make it so that series is for all the marbles, and 2022, where the Mets could have closed it out in Atlanta and didn't, you could reverse course here. But it all starts win tonight.
What a storyline it will be. And we'll have you covered here, obviously, on the Mets Pod every week throughout this wild card race. This is the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer today. Remember to subscribe to the show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your shows. Leave us a review with a question as you heard today, and we'll look for it for a future mailbag. Thank you to our 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. Thank you to our comment section on YouTube. Always bringing it. We really appreciate it. Of course, you can tweet at Joe at PSL the Flushing. You can watch every episode on SNY's YouTube channel, so subscribe over there as well. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll catch you next week.